Wow, I had no sound. That's crazy. All right, we're back. So ah, that's what it was. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'll get back to it on that now. But we're gonna go through it all today. Obviously, if you're just joining in and you're not you're hearing me now, something happened with the mic. So I appreciate Darcy for letting me know. That's kind of embarrassing to be honest. 7 minutes in and whatever. But anyways, we're gonna go through a lot today. Free agency started. Obviously, DJ Reed signed with the Detroit Lions. God, the linebacker and Roy Lopez, they signed with the Detroit Lions. I went through this earlier, and then it didn't have no sound. So when I uploaded to the podcast, it'll be a little bit different. So sorry about the no sound for the first couple things. Like I said, I'm just getting, it's a new setup kind of thing. I'm getting ready to close on a house, so that's why there was no sound. So I appreciate the people commenting in. Sorry about that. That was totally my fault. But I was saying before everything, no one heard me, so it really didn't matter. But I was going back and I was thinking about, when you're the Detroit Lions and you are thinking about, the when you go back and you think about the Detroit Lions, you're going back and you're saying, okay, at one point in time, did the Detroit Lions change your mind, right? And we got to go back to when Brad Holmes got here. And I go back because did we forget where we came from? Now, when I say did we forget where we came from, I say this in the most loving manner. We came from absolute garbage. Garbage. And you had general managers, everyone remembers the Damian Woody. Everyone remembers the Trey Flowers. I forget the numbnuts that was a corner, Justin Coleman, that Matty Patty and Bob Quinn signed to that deal that he was a slot corner and they made him a corner outside. Totally dumb. But that's just what has happened. And I went back and I wanted to study just exactly what equates to a good team. I had this chart. I forgot where I got it from, but it's a great chart right here. This is free agency spending versus wins since 2012. And if you look up at the top, the Jaguars have spent the most and they have won the very, very least. You see the Jets. They have won just like the Browns, nothing. They have spent some of the most money. You look at the Browns. They've spent some money, no wins. This is since 2012, so just keep that in mind. You got the Lions on the left side. You got the Buccaneers on the left side, the Bears on the left side, the Titans on the left side, the Dolphins on the left side. And you go, man, what's the difference? So if you look at the right side, you got the Bills, you got the Eagles, you got the Rams, you got the Cowboys, Steelers, Packers, Seahawks, Chiefs, Patriots, Saints, and Broncos. And if you go back over those times, most of the Super Bowl champions have came on that right side. On that right side. Now, obviously, it's been the Chiefs and the Patriots, and the Patriots had a huge spending spree at one point, but it just goes to show you that spending the most in free agency doesn't equate to wins. And, we go back on it. I remember a time when we got Damian Woody for the Detroit Lions. I know there's a lot of old heads that are saying, well, we got Damian Woody. That was awesome. Yeah, that was not awesome because it didn't really pan out. So what I'm trying to say to the masses, and obviously I know there's a lot of Lions fans out there that are they're a little bit disappointed because we should have been more active. But when you look at it from this perspective, two things. Number one, this free agency class was penned as a weak class, and if you look at it in totality, it's a very weak class. And if you look at it in comparisons with the draft. For the Detroit Lions, the draft is the better play. It just is. Obviously we know that there's names out there like Aziz Ojulari, Calais Campbell, Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, who can probably come back, Matthew Judon, Charles Omenihu. Obviously I listed Cooper Kupp because of the Jared Goff connection, Will Hernandez and Rasul Douglas. But, This is the way it's going, and obviously if you're a Detroit Lions fan, like you look at the Vikings, right? They got Javon Hargrave, they got Jonathan Allen. There's no doubt that they got a little bit better pass rush wise. But they are playing in the NFC North against the Detroit Lions, and you're going to go against the Detroit Lions who run the ball at a considerable rate, and you're going to go against the Lions and they could run the ball. And those two players that they signed to the Vikings are two of the worst run defenders in the NFL. So I always go back to saying this. Like I love saying this because I think it's the most important part. If you're a good player, a team is going to find a way to either one, keep you on their team, or two, they're going to try to get draft capital from you. Usually you see a team like put a franchise tag on a player, then they trade them. It happens all the time. I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if T. Higgins is one of those guys. But when we go back and we look at, all the players that get to free agency, like look at the top guys that get to free agency year after year. And then go look at their production, go look at the way the team that they played on, the way that they performed. That's just some of the things that happen. So I'm not really worried about the way that they're playing their free agency is going right now. Free agency is still we're not even 2 days in, and people are already freaking out about it. So it is what it is. But that is kind of like the whole dealio right there. Obviously, a lot of people were freaked out, and I was just like, look, I got to go back on it. I got to look at it from a realistic standpoint. What does it mean to not spend money, and what does it mean to winning? And when I went back and there was this chart that I found on X, you could see it's very black and white. Very black and white. The Jaguars spent the most. They are a horrible team. The Jets spent the most. They are a horrible team. The Browns spent the most. They are a horrible team. You look at everyone from that axis in the middle to the right: Eagles, Rams, Ravens, Chiefs, Patriots, Packers, Steelers, Rams, Broncos. Those teams win a lot more than the teams on the left. And this is from 2012, so the Lions did spend a pretty good amount, and they didn't win bookus. So that shows you exactly where it's going. So a lot of people are worried about the Detroit Lions not spending the money that they have. I'd rather invest that into re-signing Kirby Joseph, re-signing Brian Branch. What does a guy like Josh Sweat really get me? What does he really get me? Like, how do I know he's going to come over from Philadelphia and be the key player next to Aiden Hutchinson? And then you go look at this. Here's another example of the way the NFL works. Go look at every edge rusher in the NFL and go tell me who's the opposite side of that number one edge rusher. Do you know the number one edge rusher for the Cleveland Browns? I mean, there's probably someone that does. I think the only example that you can make out of it is the New York Giants. The New York Giants have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, 1A, 1B. And they have Dexter Lawrence in the middle. It's a fantastic line. They don't win nothing. It just goes back to what I've been saying the whole entire time. Just because you have two guys at one position does not mean that you have the whole defense set. I think it's more important to have depth. And I think earlier, there was a video I had before where I kind of compared the Eagles to the Lions. And if you go back and look at the Eagles, $8.5 million was the top end of the player that they spent on their defensive line. Most of those guys they drafted and they developed, and they caught fire with some of the guys lately. But for the most part, how I really struggled finding defensive linemen. So, like I'm trying to say, this is not a cut and dry type thing. There's still more to go. I think the best way to win free agency is to stay out of the bidding wars. And I like that, with DJ Reed, you stayed out of the bidding war for Carlton Davis. You got him for 3 years, $48 million. Carlton Davis signed for 3 years and $60 million. So at the end of the day, good job, Brad Holmes, because you got the better corner in my eyes. I think DJ Reed is a better corner than Carlton Davis. Now, I always thought Carlton Davis was a good corner, but I always thought DJ Reed was a really, really good corner. You know, I always liked him, especially when he went to the Jets and you started to see him become a really good player. Obviously, he's known for his pass interferences and he leads the league in that. And you got Terry on Arnold on the opposite side, and they might be a walking pass interference machine, but I want you to look at this. This is the most important part. The most touchdowns given up in a season that he's ever gave up in a season is 2. DJ Reed, I'm going to say this again, has only gave up 2 touchdowns in one of the most touchdowns he's given up in his career. So every year he gives up 1 or 2. Last year he was 11th in least yards after catch given up, 123. And when you talk about what does it mean to be a guy who does a good job at being a corner, I look at 2 things. Do you give up touchdowns? No. Does he give up yards after the catch? No. He's in the top 12, top 15. And then I look at it like this. When we say he only gave up 2 touchdowns last year, because that's how many he gave up. Do you know who also gave up 2 touchdowns last year? The reigning defensive player of the year, Patrick Surtain. Patrick Surtain only gave up 2 touchdowns last year when he was thrown on. Only 2. So not only did Brad Holmes go out there and get a guy who is a huge steal at $48 million for 3 years compared to $60 million for 3 years for Carlton Davis, you get a guy who is pretty elite. When you look at the numbers say he's elite. I don't take that lightly by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe some people do, but I just don't. Let's get to some comments. I know there's some comments in there. Let's go. Nate says, "Hey buddy, hey man." Steve says 313 day, and we're talking about the Lions. Life is good. Yeah, you know, I started off on a bad one. I didn't have my microphone on, so that was pretty stupid of me, but it is what it is. All right, let's get to what I was going to talk about. Let's talk about the guys that we brought on to the Detroit Lions. Let's talk about the free agents that we brought on to the Detroit Lions. Let's get to the free agent signings. Now, I think a lot of people are underwhelmed. I think a lot of people are underwhelmed at the signings that the Detroit Lions had. You know, DJ Reed obviously was a signing. People are like, whoa, they got DJ Reed. Fantastic, right? Yeah, I think it's great. But these were the additions and the departures. DJ Reed comes to Detroit. Grant Stewart comes to Detroit. Roy Lopez gets to Detroit. We're gonna profile them each one. So stay tuned to that. The departures: Carlton Davis goes to New England. Kevin Zeitler goes to Tennessee. Fatu Melifonwu goes to Miami. That was kind of like a prove it deal, and he's going to prove himself. Kindle Vildor goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know a lot of people are kind of a little bit, happy that Kindle Vildor gets to go to Tampa Bay because they didn't want him here in Detroit. But for the most part, Kindle Vildor had a really good year last year, a really good year, and it wasn't nothing star worthy. It wasn't a great year by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a nice year. And with all the injuries that the Detroit Lions had at every position, I mean, having a guy that could step in and be competent at least when he's your 4th cornerback, you can't get much worse than that. So those are the additions and the departures. So that is what it is, but it is what it is. So let's go through the guys. So I want to go through the players that we signed in Detroit. Let's start with DJ Reed. This is a good one here. These are 4 advanced stats that I got from a Pride of Detroit article where they were talking about DJ Reed, and it was a fantastic article by Ryan Matthews of the Pride of Detroit. So he says 156 coverage snaps. So this is from the Pride of Detroit article. Did Reed play his fair share of zone coverage with the New York Jets in 2024? Sure, he played 55.7 of his coverage snaps, 279 total in zone, according to Pro Football Focus. But he played 31.1 of his snaps in man coverage, 156 total, which placed him 34th out of 197 in cornerbacks last year. In 2023, he played 32.8 of his coverage snaps in man, good for 28th among cornerbacks. Prior to that, he did play considerably more zone than man, but old narratives die hard. I think what Ryan's trying to say is a lot of people when Detroit signed DJ Reed, a lot of people are saying he plays zone. He doesn't really fit in the Detroit Lions kind of way. But what Ryan says in that article with the zone, the man coverage snaps, that's a pretty impressive stat. So let's get to the next one. That's tight man coverage. Obviously, 37.3 tight window target rate. Ryan writes, despite that volume of targets coming his way, Reed played some real sticky coverage last season. According to NFL's next gen stats, Reed forced a tight throwing window on 37.3% of his targets, the fourth highest rate by cornerbacks with at least 40 targets, just ahead of Gardner at 35.3. So that stat is something that you can really hang your head on, because when you talk about cornerbacks, do they make the throw hard for the quarterback to get it in there? Like, are you easy to throw against, or are you hard to throw against? I think that's what the tight man coverage is about. Can you throw easily against you, or is it hard to throw against you in the pass? Those are some of the things that can certainly be the case. So when we talk about tight man coverage, and you're not, you're placing in the top half of the league with 37.5% of his targets, the fourth highest rate by cornerbacks with at least 40 targets, that's a pretty damn good target rate. And forcing it into a tight window. And when you throw it into a tight window, there's two things that usually do happen. One, you throw it into a tight window, it's incomplete. Two, it's just a great pass by the quarterback. Or three, it gets intercepted for a turnover. It doesn't have to be DJ Reed, because that's one of the foibles that DJ Reed has. He doesn't intercept the ball. But if you go watch some of the Jets games, his ability to be so sticky in coverage leads to an interception that goes to a safety, goes to a linebacker. And that's some of the things that would help Detroit, because when you talk about having a cornerback that's good in tight coverage, and they got to make a precise throw, they got to make it either high or they got to make it low. Well, a guy like Kirby Joseph is going to love that. A guy like Kirby Joseph is going to love a guy like DJ Reed being so sticky in man coverage. He knows that if he just gets there in a certain amount of time, he could break the game open with a quick interception or a good PBU. Even Brian Branch could do the same, because when you have a guy that's tight in man coverage, it's very good for you. So I like that a lot. So the third one is 8 defensive stops in man coverage. Ryan writes, among 127 qualifying quarterbacks in 2024, Reed finished second in Pro Football Focus defensive stops. As a tackle that contributes in a failure for the offense with 8 defensive stops when making tackles on passing plays while in man coverage. This cornerback who finished first in that statistic was Amik Robertson. So a cornerback that you have on the roster right now finished first in this metric with 10. Great. Brian Branch finished 6th among 104 qualifying safeties with 6 defensive stops. And out of 89 linebackers, Alex Anzalone finished first with 8 defensive stops. So what it's saying is you got guys like Brian Branch, like Amik Robertson, like DJ Reed, guys that can make defensive stops. If there's a pass completed on them, you could bet their ass that they're gonna make that tackle. That's the key thing there, man. If you can make the tackle, that's what matters in this league. I don't give a crap if you're good in coverage and that, but if you're giving up a pass and you let them go for 80 yards, what good does that do for me? If you can't tackle after the pass is completed, what does that do for me? Because in the end, there's a probability metric here. When you're talking about a cornerback, they're going to give up a play here or there. And the good ones, they're usually just more sticky and they they don't allow big passes. But the really good ones don't allow big plays off yak yardage. They don't allow a guy to get free. A guy takes a slant 85 yards, that shouldn't happen. You should obviously be in the right position. And when you see guys like Brian Branch and Amik Robertson and Alex Anzalone and now DJ Reed, all players that are good at making defensive stops, that metric that is a tackle that ends up in failure for the offense, that's what you like to read. That's exactly what you want in a defense, and I'm pretty sure Calvin Shepard wants that in a defense because he played linebacker, and the best thing about playing linebacker is when you make a stop, like you make a stop and you make a critical stop. It just makes everything better, man. A critical stop is all that matters. The last one is he has an 18% forced incompletion rate. Reed posted an 18 forced incompletion rate in 2024, good for 10th among 127 qualifying cornerbacks. That put him in the 96th percentile of players at his position. He recorded 11 forced incompletions in total on 60 targets, which also placed him tied 10th among that pool of cornerbacks. So, again, the guy makes plays. You look at these 4 advanced stats, these matter. Defensive stops, boom. Forced incompletion rate, boom. Tight window target rate, boom. Obviously, a lot of people are worried about him being in man coverage, but I'm going to tell you this right now. The way that he plays the game, I'm pretty sure he can play man coverage. I'm pretty sure if the Jets played in man coverage with Reed and Sauce, I think they would be a lot better of a defense, to be honest. But since their offense was so horrible for the Jets, they kind of had to go to this kind of zone defense to kind of probably save stamina for the Jets defense. That's kind of the way I see it. All right, let's go to Roy Lopez. This is a guy who the Detroit Lions signed. He is a defensive tackle, a nose tackle. A lot of people are wondering about this guy named Roy Lopez. And I got an interesting statistic with this guy too. It's a good chart. I'll show it to you in a minute. But Roy Lopez started 16 games at nose tackle in 2024 and registered 28 tackles, 18 pressures per Pro Football Focus, 4 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, 3 pass deflections, a sack, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. His PFF grades are middling at best, but that's not overly surprising considering his position is typically graded low and that he was playing on a bad defense. That's from Pride of Detroit, that little snippet right there. And honestly, when you talk about Roy Lopez, there's a couple things that you look at. Obviously, we know you're not getting Aaron Donald. You're not getting Aaron Donald with this guy, but he's going to be a good defensive depth guy. And the way I look at it is we don't know what Broderick Martin is going to be. I've been very, very vocal on this channel, on this podcast. I really didn't think Broderick Martin and Hendon Hooker were worth the picks where they were drafted at. Unfortunately, a guy like Roy Lopez can help alleviate that burden. Who knows what Broderick Martin's going to be? Who knows if he's going to be ready? I thought last year he was going to show out and be a good player. He had the opportunity to really make himself a good player with the amount of injuries that the defensive line had, and he never took control of it. A guy like Roy Lopez, which it sounds like a made-up generic Madden character, he's actually pretty good. Let's look at this chart, okay? If you look up at the right-hand corner, Roy Lopez, he's ahead of Chris Jones. He's right by Vita Vea, and then DJ Reader is in the middle, kind of with the double team percentage. Lee McNeil's right there. Levi Onwuzurike is right there. And you can see that Roy Lopez, he gets double teamed 60% of the time. DJ Reader is getting double teamed at 60% of the time too. So teams, when they play Roy Lopez, when they play DJ Reader, Obviously, they are not going to be sitting there going, "Oh, we're going to chip him." The chip to double team ratio, it just doesn't work. And when you're getting double teamed and chipped as much as Roy Lopez, as much as Vita Vea, which Vita Vea is a hell of a defensive tackle. Obviously, if you are a football fan, you know Vita Vea is a hell of a football tackle, and to be in the same category as him is pretty special. But Roy Lopez is a guy. The numbers don't scream. Okay, nothing screams off the top of the stats. Nothing. There's nothing that you see from the top of the stats. You go, wow, this guy is really good, man. But if you look inside the numbers and you look at what he's supposed to do as a defensive tackle, as a nose tackle, you see that he does offer something for the Detroit Lions. And if he's a rotational piece with DJ Reader and he takes the spot of Broderick Martin and we go with someone else instead of Broderick Martin, it's a win. If he can offer more than Broderick has offered, that's a win. But, if I was Broderick Martin, I would be really worried about my roster spot because going and getting a guy like this in the early part of free agency, it doesn't bode well for Broderick. All right, let's go to Grant Stewart. Stewart, he says, this is from prior to Detroit. Prior to the Lions matchup against the Colts, special teams coordinator Dave Fipp pointed to Stewart as a standout for Indy. Number 41 had a hair on fire type player. This guy is relentless, Fipp said. He's got a great story I read this summer. There's a great article about him, but just a great player, and I have a lot of respect for him. Don't think when the Detroit Lions played him, they played two of these guys last year. They played Roy Lopez last year in the third game, and the 11th game they played the Colts, and they played Grant Stewart on special teams. Don't think that they did a little scouting for the free agency during those games. And Stewart did a damn good job. And if you go back, there's an athletic article I believe there is. Stewart was a undrafted free agent. He really worked his way up from the top. He said today via the Twitter, he said today that he came here when he had opportunities to go to a spot that he would get an easy job, get an easy chance to go play, and he wouldn't have to really compete with anybody in terms of starting. But it's just great to see a guy like this, and this is the part that a lot of people just don't really understand. Not everyone is meant to be a Detroit Lion. Just like not everyone back in the day was meant to be a Detroit Red Wing. Not everyone that was playing basketball at the time was not meant to be a bad boy Piston. Sometimes when you're in this culture of winning and you have a coach like Dan Campbell and a coach that, heat, grit, fire, let's play, let's go balls to the wall. Sometimes you have that guy. And not everyone can be a Detroit Lion. That's just the standard. Not everyone could be a Baltimore Raven. Not everyone could be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Not everyone could be a Green Bay Packer. Now, you guys, the Detroit Lions, not everyone could be a Detroit Lion. And that's because of the culture that has been built here in Detroit. And you look at these two guys, Roy Lopez, Grant Stewart, DJ Reed, three guys that were signed here. DJ Reed's an undersized corner. He's not a big corner by any stretch of the imagination. He's not going to give you any metrics that you're like, wow, this guy has size. He's speedy, all that jazz. Roy Lopez, you probably heard his name and you're like, who the F is that, man? Who the F is that? Grant Stewart. It was funny. There was a guy that I really respect, and he laughed at it at first. He really did. He laughed at the signing of Grant Stewart at first. I told him, go look it up. Go look the guy up. You'll be impressed. And he was. See, this goes to my point. Not everyone is meant to be a Detroit Lion. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have a set identity that they want to bring into this team. When I had the old video of what Dan Campbell said about being in the Detroit Lions culture, I would have played it. But basically, Dan Campbell said, when you come into our building, you're expected to work. They're not going to bring they're not going to bring in a guy who doesn't want to work, doesn't play hard, doesn't do all those things. They're just not going to do that. And I thought that's what it was. These guys that they signed early on, they were obviously players that Holmes identified as guys who could fit into the Lions culture. Brad Holmes has never been about getting into the bidding wars of free agency. And why should he? A lot of people talk about the Rams and how they were after picks and all that jazz, but they didn't spend much in free agency. When they did, they spent it for a player of useful exuberance. I mean, obviously, we've seen Brad Holmes go out there and get a guy like Dave Montgomery, get a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, go out and get a guy like Kevin Zeitler. But those were. I remember my birthday's on the 19th, right? I remember they signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the 19th of March. And it was like days after free agency started. So what I'm trying to say is this isn't the end of the free agent class. But the start of the free agent class is exactly what Brad Holmes always looks for. Always looks for. Dave Montgomery fit the mold when they signed him. There was multiple other guys that Carlton Davis, when he traded for Carlton Davis. I'm forgetting some of the free agents that he signed on the first couple days because there's not really that many, but you get my drift. Like, Brad Holmes doesn't really participate early on in free agency. He kind of waits his turn, waits for all the people to kind of, take their money and spend it on unbelievably stupid. Like I said, if we go back to this chart of free agency spending versus wins, you see the right side. Those are all the teams that usually compete. And on the left side, those are all the teams that usually suck ass. So there is a correlation to spending versus wins since 2012. This is undeniable truth. You can't argue with it. You could say, well, this doesn't really tell the whole story. What doesn't it tell the whole story of? It literally tells you a story of free agency spending versus wins since 2012. And you see the Steelers, the Packers, the Cowboys, the Rams, the Seahawks don't spend the most money. Even the Vikings, the Colts, Ravens, Eagles, Cardinals, which Cardinals, they don't spend any money anyways. They're a trash organization. But you get my drift. Like, the better teams that are at the bottom are perennial winners. Why? Because they watch their spending and they don't overpay for the stupid free agents. But it is what it is. But again, Brad Holmes they have identity that they want to stick to. Dan Campbell has an identity that they're going to stick to. And the Detroit Lions have an identity. And if you are a Detroit Lions fan for however long you've been a Detroit Lions fan for, I mean, some people are going on 40 years. Some people are going on 50 years. Some people are going on 60 years. You've never understood this because this has never been the case with you guys. Like, I'm 30 years old. I'll turn 31 next Wednesday. This is uncharted territory for any Detroit Lions fan. They've never been in the position where they could say, oh, I know what winning football looks like, because most of us haven't experienced winning football. Even the old heads that seen Barry Sanders, even the old heads, like, even if you're in your 20s and you saw, Stafford and Calvin Johnson, like, you didn't see a playoff winner or a North championship, a division championship. All the old heads, I mean, there's people that are 80, 70, 60 years old. I mean, they can go back and they'd be like, I remember the last Lions playoff win. That's how bad it's been. And when you actually turn the corner and you actually have an identity of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, as a team, and the culture that you're building, it's okay to say not everyone is meant to be a Detroit Lion. It's just the way it is. Not everyone was meant to be a bad boy Piston. Not everyone was meant to be a Detroit Red Wing in the 97 through 2002. It just wasn't the case. And when you got a coach like Dan Campbell, you feel it like it's a burden of truth, man. And a lot of people, they worry about, oh, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Well, that's gonna happen. You got Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's a staple of this team. There's no doubt about it. And you can kind of see how you are going to be consistent winners, even in the face of losing coaches. You're still going to be consistent winners because you're going to have the ability to, well, have a standard of what you live by. So let's go to the comments. So I will go to the comments, and obviously there's a lot of people there. Skipper already reported. Darcy says, I'm worried about what Minnesota has done. I think what Minnesota's done on the defensive line doesn't really worry me in any slight. One of the things that these two guys that they signed struggle with is stopping the run. And Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen have been routinely bad against the run. Just always has happened. But I'm more worried about their offensive line. I think their offensive line got a lot better. The Vikings did. And honestly, I think if you really want to be honest, it's something to monitor, especially with the reports that are coming out right now about the chance that Minnesota can take a run at Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know Aaron Rodgers looked like crap in New York, but, any quarterback that goes in New York is going to look like crap. It's just the way it is, especially with that organization. And Woody Johnson, using his son, Brick Johnson, and saying that, this guy doesn't have the right Madden rating. Well, that's what it is. That's what it is. So it just sucks. But I think that's one to monitor. As this offseason goes along, the Vikings are going to be a one to monitor, especially with the Aaron Rodgers situation. Because, boy, oh boy, if you get Aaron Rodgers in this division with Caleb Williams, who I think is a pretty good quarterback, I think he's going to really turn heads in year two. Jordan Love, I think he's a top 15 quarterback in my opinion. He's going to turn heads. Jared Goff might be a top 6 quarterback. You got a lot of offensive firepower in this division. I mean, look at the wide receivers, the running backs. There's a lot of firepower in this division. And I really don't think it matters about defense at that point. It just is what it is. Barry says, so true. And then Slammin' Sam says, my team has more holes than picks. Now, I don't think the Lions have as many holes as people are saying. Slammin' Sam, he says that in the comments, my team has more holes than picks. I don't believe that to be the case. Like, if you simply go off last year, what can you really take off last year? Like, what really can you take off last year? I was talking to some guy. Who's your team then? Who's your team? Let me know. But I think that's just the way it goes. I think there's a lot of people that are saying, especially in Lions land, a lot of people are talking about the Detroit Lions and going, I don't know about them. I really don't know if you could draw any conclusions off last year in terms of the Lions. Because even the backups were starting at one point. A lot of people there like, oh, we lost against the Commanders in the NFC divisional round. Well, you finally ran out of steam, man. You finally ran out of steam. The offense still put up 30 plus points, but that defense it was a walking time bomb. It was a walking time bomb. But it is what it is. Oh, Slam and Sam is he's from I hope I don't get any hate for saying it. It's the Chiefs. I'm from Missouri. And Sam and Slam, no, you're not wrong. We talk football on this podcast, and I think you guys have. Here's what I'll say. I like you guys got that tackle from the 49ers. I think that could be really helpful for the Chiefs. Draft picks wise, this is a deep draft, so I think the Chiefs are gonna really need guys are on that offensive line. Obviously, getting rid of Joe Thuney didn't really make much sense, but he was at a high price, and maybe you can get a cheap rookie, especially in a draft. How deep it is, it's deep. So I don't really think. Anytime you have Patrick Mahomes, you're golden. You're golden in terms of you have a guy who's a cheat code, and you still have Chris Jones on the defensive side, so you're really not losing anything there. And I know you say the Broncos are looking scary in the comments, but if you look at it from this perspective, I still take Patrick Mahomes over Bo Nix, and I think that's where it's won. That whole AFC West that you play in, it's a little bit of a different conference now because even Justin Herbert's starting to look good, and if they get him some guys to throw to, he might look a little bit better. But the Chiefs are the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and anytime you got a guy like Mahomes and Chris Jones on the other side, you're going to be pretty well off. And then you sign Nick Bolton to that contract extension. You lost Justin Reed, which I'm interested how you correlate that loss, but I think the Chiefs will be fine. I think they're going to be fine. I think if they just worry about that offensive line, everything else will fall into place. I think the offensive line was the main thing, and going to get Banks from San Francisco was a definite help. You need to protect Patrick Mahomes. That's just the way it goes, man. That if you don't protect Patrick Mahomes right there, you're gonna be totally screwed. I don't care who your quarterback is. I've always said this on I've always said this on all my podcasts. I don't care who you are as a quarterback. If you're getting pressured, you're gonna be horribly upset with your quarterback. Chris Johnson asks from Facebook, he says, who do we sign that said he wanted to play with dogs? Well, that was DJ Reed, and DJ Reed is DJ Reed is a dog. He's a total dog, man, and I love DJ Reed, and I think that he has done I went through earlier in the podcast if you want to go back and watch it, but basically this guy lives, breathes, and he chose the Lions over the Commanders, and just knowing that right there, it gives you a lot of zest. Like you're excited and you're happy because this guy chose the Lions over the Commanders. He said he wanted to play with dogs, and that is a Dan Campbell type player. I think all these players that spoke today, Grant Stewart, Roy Lopez, who was dressed in a cowboy hat, and DJ Reed, who said he wanted to play with the dogs, they all seem like Detroit Lions to me. And I think that's the most important thing. Big Dan Davis says, I am concerned about the hole we have at the edge position opposite Hutch. Hutch may not take a while to get back to form. We all know Davenport won't be healthy for long either. Well, all right. I want to address this as I can. This free agency class is kind of, in terms of edges, it's kind of junky, to be honest. Like when Josh Sweat is your best defensive end, I mean, and getting that kind of money that he was getting paid, is he really the best edge, or is he just the best edge in a bad market? I was going to go through this later on, but I'll put it up here. Azeez Ojulari is still available. I like him. Von Miller's still available if you want to kick the tires at him. You can re-sign Zadarius Smith. Matthew Judon still available. Charles Omenihu is still available, which is our chief fan in the comments. That's his guy, Kansas City Chiefs. Cooper, those are the edge guys that are available that I like. But all in all, like, this is not a good free agency class when you talk about edge rushers. Dan, you say let's go get a guy opposite Hutch. You go get a guy opposite Hutch. Fine. But my whole thing would be, who is it going to be, and how much are you going to pay? Because I look at free agency, and I go, there's not one guy that I'm like, I gotta go get. I mean, Josh Sweat was the guy that I was like, oh, I'm interested in him. But when he got paid what he got paid by the Cardinals, I said, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, because we don't know what Josh Sweat is outside of Philadelphia. It's like kind of like the Trey Flowers thing. Once you get Trey Flowers in here, he turns into a total pumpkin. And that's just the way it goes. So, and I love this draft for the defensive ends. Love this draft for the edge rushers. I love this draft for the defensive linemen. That's why if like you're a Detroit Lions fan, if they don't address edge in free agency, you can bet your ass they might double dip in the draft. The draft is really deep. Free agency, this. If you look at all the pundits, all the experts, they've been saying for a while that this is the weakest free agency class in a long time. And it is. It's not. It's very. There's a lot of guys that are going to get thrown money that teams are going to regret signing. That's just the way I'll put it, especially in the last couple of days. But it is what it is. Slam and Sam, the Chiefs fan, he says people are saying not to worry about safety. That 3 are enough. I'm still unsure. Yeah, I mean, when you lose a guy like Justin Reed, that really sucks. But the reality with Kansas City, they draft really well, and they do find good players. And Veach, the general manager, he's going to do a damn good job at putting together the roster that's going to help you win. And I think anytime you got a general manager like Brett Veach, I think you're fine. I really do. I wouldn't worry about it, because, like I always say with people, if you got a good general manager, he's going to find you the talent that you lost because other teams want to pay your guys. It's the same thing. Veach is a freaking phenomenal stud. He's just like Roseman, Howie Roseman. He's just like Les Snead in LA. He's like Brad Holmes in Detroit, and those general managers, they go out there and they say, look, I can draft, I can develop, I can get my guys. Now, obviously, they're going to miss on some guys, but when they hit, they hit. Big Dan Davis says, what is Brad's plan at edge to rely on injury-prone Davenport and a rookie edge? Well, free agency still isn't done. That's number one. Number two, I think it's going to be a rookie edge that you end up relying on. And is that a bad thing? No, it's not really a bad thing, especially when you look at the guys that are still available. I mean, like I said, Azeez Al-Jawari, who is the top-rated edge right now left on the market, he's missed games. Like he's missed games, a lot of games. Von Miller has missed games. Zadarius Smith you can bring back. I'm sure they'll bring Zadarius Smith back by the end of this. There's just so many guys that are on the free agency list that I'm not really ready to go pay. Like DeMarcus Lawrence kind of interested me at the start. But none of these guys that I see on the free agency list, that they're not guys I'm like willingly like, is this going to make the team better? Like I said earlier in the podcast, I said, go out and name me a number one defensive end, like a top 10 edge rusher in the league, and then tell me who his other counterpart is. It's usually not close, but look, I think the defensive line is going to be decent. Unfortunately, I think it's a little bit overblown in Detroit how bad the defensive line was, because you lost 7 of the 9 players you broke camp with in the defensive line. You realize that? I'm going to say it again. You lost 7 of the 9 guys you broke camp with. You can't judge anything off last year. That was an anomaly. That was straight out of this world. It started in training camp with John Kaminsky, and then it got worse and worse and worse, and that's what you dealt with. Fortunately, Sam, our Chiefs guy says, fortunately, edge looks deep this draft. Only thing deeper might be running back. The running back is deep too. Offensive line is deep. You know, I know you're a Chiefs fan, so offensive line is deep. That's a place where you can go. Defensive line is deep. Edge is deep. There are certain parts of the secondary that is deep, but there's a lot of guys out there. Just not clear what restricted free agent means. Aoshika and Zylstra are they still with us or free agents? So it's a good point. This is a good comment, Jason. So it breaks down to if you tendered them. And the Lions have not said who they've tendered and who they didn't tender. Miles Adams, who was a defensive lineman, was a restricted free agent that they re-signed, maybe just to get ahead of the game. But the way it works is if you tender a restricted free agent, I think you have the ability to match if a team gives them an offer. So if someone gives Coyote Oshika an offer like $4 million, are you going to match it or are you not going to match it? And I don't know if there's compensation involved because there could be in terms of compensatory picks, but that's kind of what happens with restricted free agents. And usually you see them come back, but it's not clear on who they tendered and who they didn't tender. That's kind of like what is the main thing. The main thing that we don't know is who did they tender. Usually, I think last year the Lions said they tendered these guys. They have not done that this year, and I would love to see who they tendered and who they didn't, and then see who gets a contract offer from out of the franchise. So that's what a restricted free agent means. Obviously, you'll have a chance to, if you tendered the guy, you'll have a chance to match the offer of what the team, like if someone wants to change Zylstra so bad that they say, I'll give you 1 year, $5 million. So you could either match it or you could take the compensation, which they'll tell you with the compensatory pick or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of the way it goes into the restricted free agents. But again, I don't know. We don't know who is tendered and who's not tendered. That's the main point that a lot of people just don't know. Give me Matt Judon or Azeez Ojulari. Both are young and shouldn't cost most. Even bringing back Darius Smith for a year wouldn't be too costly. So I believe Matthew Judon is in his early 30s. I believe he's just hitting his 30s. Azeez Ojulari is a young guy, but the problem with him is he's missed a lot of time in the last 2 years. If you go look at his how many games he's played in 2 years, it's not much. So it's basically like a Marcus Davenport 2.0 that's a little bit younger. So they shouldn't cost much, but this is the problem with that free agency class is that these are the guys that you're like, that guy, and it's Matthew Judon. That guy, it's Azeez Ojulari, who is one of the top ranked edge rushers in the free agency. And the problem with Azeez Ojulari right now is he can't stay on the field. You already have that problem with Marcus Davenport. So that could be, he could be worth the kick of the tires, but ultimately, like, if it was me, I'd bring in Von Miller as Darius Smith. And I know Von Miller is long in the tooth. I know Darius Smith, it wasn't all he was cracked up to be. But if I can pair them with the edge rusher of the rookie class, I think you'll be fine. But that's what it comes down to at this point in time is who are you going to get and who are you going to who will be a guy that's going to help you out. Like that's the main question. That's the main dealio right there. So it is what it is. Let me see if there's any news that's percolating. No news while I was doing this podcast, so we're good. Barry mentioned something that could happen, and I think that he could be particularly right. He thinks Holmes will trade up in the top 20 for an edge, and I did a video on that. I did do a video on that because there is a possibility that there could be a guy from University of Tennessee that could be available because he didn't have a really good combine interview, and that was James Pierce, and he had 7.5 sacks last year and 33 tackles. James Pierce could be a guy that you could potentially go get. James Pierce 4.47 collected a faster 40 time than Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, CD Lamb, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Pierce Jr. is a 6'5", 245 pounds, so he's not a small cat by any stretch of imagination. But that's just kind of what you get when you talk about this. So, I think what Barry said about going and trading up for a edge, I think they're gonna do. Like I really do think that they're gonna do that. I think when you saw the reports that they were interested in Myles Garrett, when you saw the reports that they made an offer into Max Crosby, you know that they want to edge bad. And this is, fortunately for them, this draft is really deep. And if they want to go for a bold move, they could do that. I just think it's kind of lazy for some of these people to talk about, go trade for Trey Hendrickson or something along those lines. I mean, go get the cheaper player and make him a staple on your team. That would be fantastic. More comments. Slam and Sam said, I feel that it seems like we're in the draft like Steelers during the season. We always manage to be over 500. Slam and Sam, I wouldn't worry about your Chiefs, man. I wouldn't worry about your Chiefs. I think your general manager is one of the best general managers in the game. You have the best quarterback in the game. You have the best defensive tackle in the game. In my opinion, Chris Jones is one of the best. Andy Reid is a pseudo master, and the fact that you guys were even in the Super Bowl last year speaks volumes about where you were. You had no offensive line. You threw Joe Thuney out to the left tackle because he was your only guy that could block. I mean, you spent that. We got a guy named Penei Sewell here. His cousin was drafted by you guys, and he was a disaster, Kingsley. And look, if you can get to the Super Bowl off last year, if you would ask me before the playoffs, like, is this a Chiefs team that can make the Super Bowl? I would have told you no, and the only reason I would have told you no is because the offensive line stunk, and you saw it in the Super Bowl exactly what happened. It was a total, a terrible matchup for the Chiefs. The Eagles were the worst matchup possible for the Chiefs, and that's just exactly what happened. Not going to worry about O-line. We have one DT and one and a half DNs in a 4-3. This feels crazy. Don't worry, you guys are going to get some guys. It's like I said, if we go back to what I was talking about earlier in the podcast, I don't know if you joined us, but this is the breakdown of the wins versus free agency spending, and you guys could see the Chiefs don't spend a lot and they win a lot. It's kind of the way they do things in beautiful Kansas City, Missouri. So I free agency isn't over by any stretch of imagination. And I imagine that you'll go get some guys and make them key players. Barry says, I think they interviewed him. I do think they interviewed him too. I'm not quite sure if they did or not, but it is what it is. We'll find out. And then Sam says, we got to the Super Bowl because of the defense. Yeah, that's how it was. But you also got to the Super Bowl because Patrick Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes. I think he had 12 fourth quarter comebacks last year. Like I said, anytime you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes in your offense as your quarterback, you always have a shot to win. So Slam and Sam, don't worry about it. It's still early in the free agency market. You're going to get some guys. Veach is going to put together a roster, and you guys are going to be fine. I think even if you waited till the draft, you'd be fine, because I I just think that you guys have a really good. Uh, you have a good quarterback. There's a lot of holes, but you know what? When you have the best quarterback in the league, it really don't matter how many holes you got. He's gonna keep you in some games that you should be out of. And I don't see anyone in the AFC West that really makes me think that they're gonna take charge over the Chiefs. Like, I just don't see it, because the Broncos got their set of problems, and the Chargers got their set of problems, and it's just the way it goes. So it is what it is. All right, before we close, let me get to the last one. This was from the Sporting News. They said the biggest bargains of free agency. We couldn't agree more with Tracy's take. Reed has been one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the league over the past 3 years, because he played opposite star cornerback Sauce Gardner. Reed's 2024 numbers were very comparable to Davis, and he came at a cheaper price. Reed surrendered completions on 57.1% of his passes thrown his way and gave up a passer rating of 87.1. Meanwhile, Davis posted a 55% completion rate against a passer rating of 77% when targeted. Again, a lot of people are penning the move of DJ Reed as a huge step. And DJ Reed was a bargain. That's basically what they're saying. And I love what people are saying about this Detroit Lions team. I love what people are saying about it being a bargain, because it is a bargain. It's a total bargain. When you talk about it being a bargain, you pay $12 million less for a better player. Good job, Brad Holmes. But let's go back to, so who's still out there? Who is still out there? We just went through it a couple times, but these are some notable guys that are out there available. Azeez Ojulari, Calais Campbell, Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, Matthew Judon. These are guys that I would be interested in. Charles Menu, who they got a Chiefs fan. That's one of his defensive ends. Cooper Kupp, a wide receiver, was just released. Will Hernandez as a guard, because Kevin Zeitler left. And obviously, Rasul Douglas, I think, could be a match on any team. So, any of these guys would be something up my sleeve. Obviously, when we talk about the Detroit Lions, we talk about the ability to the draft is going to be their friend, number one, and number two, you didn't overspend on anybody. So, if you want to take some shots now, you can, but again, the guys that are on this list, there is no guy on here I'm like, if they don't get him, it's a shame. There's no guy like that. I just went through the list, and then there's more guys. There's more guys available, but this has been penned as one of the weakest free agency classes in quite some time. Not just by a guy like me, but by guys like Albert Breer and Tom Pelissaro and guys that cover the league for as long as they have. They called this their worst free agency class in some time. It's not like they say that without going through it. Obviously, they have this opinion, and the way that this free agency has kicked off, it's been a little bit crazy, because there's been players getting money that you're like, how the hell are they getting that much money? How the hell are they getting that much money? And that's just the way it is right now. This free agency class isn't that good. And when you get a guy like DJ Reed at a $12 million discount compared to the guy that you had, you got to think that you won the free agency. And I don't care that the Vikings have Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen. Both those guys stink in the run game. So good luck going against Jahmyr Gibbs and Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery if you're the Vikings, because those guys have routinely been horrible in the run game. Even wherever they've been horrible in the run game. So, look, a lot of people are going to spend money. A lot of people are going to spend money stupidly. But at this point in time, I think the Detroit Lions have a good thing going. Obviously, we went through the whole, spent money versus wins. We went over the additions and how they kind of go with each other. But this has been a great start to the free agency. The free agency is not done. What we know about Brad Holmes late in the free agency period, he will sign guys like Zeitler and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and guys who can really make an impact later on. But it doesn't have to be in one day. And I think it's important that, you don't go hog wild on that. And sometimes you're waiting out for these guys for them to take a 1-year deal. And that's kind of what I think Brad Holmes is doing, especially with the coming extensions that he's going to have to make, with Aiden Hutchinson needing an extension pretty soon, and with Kirby Joseph getting an extension soon. It's going to open up a spot for everyone. So this has been a great podcast. Obviously, it started a little bit silent, because my mic was off. Like I said, I'm closing on a house Monday, hopefully. So my whole area, my whole working area is a little bit messed up right now because I got this over here and this over here. So I appreciate you guys for dealing with me through the process. Obviously, this was a pretty good hour-long podcast. Next week we'll have someone on. We're gonna have some frequent guests in the next couple weeks leading up to the draft. So stay tuned. That might be live. It might not be live. So stay tuned to that. We'll update you through the Detroit Lions News podcast page or my Twitter, Detroit Joe Chap. As always, you can go to Detroit Lions News podcast on Facebook, Detroit Lions News, One Pride Detroit on Instagram, my Twitter at Detroit Joe Chap. You can join our group, One Pride Nation, too, if you want to talk to other fans and just start the conversation. Always welcome to do that. And I'm going to start posting on my TikTok, too. So you can go to Joe Chap Sports for that, too. But thank you for listening. I'll see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Lions football here on the Detroit Lions News podcast. We will see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Lions football. Thank you for watching.